Hello dear learners, this is Majid back again. Sorry for a delay of the tutorial for 1 week. I was kind of out. So let's begin and go to our second tutorial. So this tutorial will be actually an explanation of the tutorial that was first one. So we will be going through exactly what happened and how we made the first application work. By first application I mean hello world. So there are a few things in the hello world application I told you that I will explain. So this would be an explanation part. So the contents of today's tutorial would be recap of the first tutorial, which is actually a hello world application. In case anyone has forgotten it, they'll be actually going through it again so that we know what steps did we follow. Then we'll be going a little bit into the annotations, those are used, and what are those annotations, how they work, and how they make our application work. Then afterwards we'll be going through the mappings. What are the mappings, how they work, and how do they use the URL patterns and all that, and what is their functionality, how do they work with the controllers. And then afterwards we'll be going into the POM file. We'll be discussing what POM file is, how does it make things easier for us, and how does it make how does it actually use Maven and all the dependencies and jar files and all that. We'll be going through it again today. So let's go to the recap part. What did we do exactly to learn or to make the new program? So what we did was, like, once our prerequisites were fulfilled, like having a JDK, having Maven, having Eclipse and all that, what we did was we went to the file, we created a new from the Spring Starter project. Afterwards we gave our information and all that. Then we went to the next, we selected Spring Web, we selected our Spring Boot version, and then afterwards we went to next, and then once we finished, we had an empty project. So right now I'm not going to do the finish. When you do the finish, there would be an empty project here. So I'm gonna do the cancel. Now once we had our empty project, what did we do is, like, we actually went into the Java part. So we created a package, and in it we created a controller. That controller was REST controller. And what is REST controller, I'll be going into again. So in the annotations part, then we created a simple method which was say hello, and then we gave it a mapping. So what does get mapping do? We'll go into it a little later, so just bear with me right now. So here, when we do public hello world, it should return a string that should be displayed on the view page. So let's go and check our application like we did previously. We run it, and then we wait for the Spring Boot application to run. Now it is running. So we go and run a browser, and we go and check localhost 8080. There it is. Our application is running. Hello world, we can see the hello world. Now let's go back into the tool suite, stop it. The application is stopped. So once it is stopped, we shouldn't be able to see anything here. Let's go. So this cannot be read. The server is not working because of course we closed the application. So let's go, and then yeah, so this was the recap what we did exactly previously. So now we'll be going into further parts, and those parts are exactly what we need to do. Like, we'll be going into the explanation of the annotations, what exactly the annotations are, how they work, what is REST controller annotation, what is get mapping annotation, what is a Spring Boot application annotation, and how these things work, and what makes these things to use an essential for us, because if we don't do, that would be that wouldn't be actually Spring Boot making things easier for us. So yeah, let's go into the explanation of the annotations, and yeah, let's do it. It's the part where we explain our annotations. Those are used in our Spring Boot Hello World application. So the first one, which is in the main class, is a Spring Boot application, which is actually nothing but the combination of configuration, enable auto configuration, and component scan annotations. So what does these annotations do? If we combine them, it becomes a Spring Boot application. But what do the ones those actually make Spring Boot application do, and how do they work? So when we create a Spring Boot class, we have to do it. We have to create multiple beans and multiple XML files with bean configuration, which actually tell our application that these are the objects those we'll be using are beans. So to make that XML configuration gone away, or to make it automatically, what do we do is like we create a annotate a class with configuration, and then it becomes Spring Boot bean without actually declaring a bean in XML. So this is same for the enable auto configuration. What enable auto configuration does is like it takes all the classes in that particular package or in that particular path, and then makes them beans. And the component scan is actually what it does is like it makes that particular package and all the packages those are inside that package, or the I would say sub packages, it actually makes them considered as the components or beans, also means objects. So this whole Spring Boot application simply does is like it enables the in classes those we are using in our package or in the sub packages of the main application class file considered as beans, so that we don't have to we don't have to do them separately in XML files. Then there is REST controller. REST controller is again actually combination of two different annotations. One of them is controller, one of them is response body. So what it does is like it takes the classes. By classes I mean the implementation classes with methods and all that, and tells the Spring framework that these classes are implementation classes, so they should be scanned and put them as a controller. Once they are controller, what we can do is like we can use that particular class methods and then bind them to some response or some mapping or something that can be used to display pages and results and all that. So what it does is like request controller does is like it takes methods, and then based on their return values it generates a response body accordingly. So it is combination of response body and controller. Then there is get mapping, which is actually shortcut of request mapping, which actually has two value in two different parameters. There are more parameters, but then for now we'll go into the value and method. So what it does is like it tells get mapping takes some value whichever we give it, which becomes the value of the request mapping, and then method is request method dot get, which actually handles all the get requests for our application. So these are the annotations those we are using right now. There are annotations like put mapping, yeah, and then post mapping. Those things we'll go into them later down the road. For now these are the annotations those we are using. Now we'll go into the mapping, a particular mapping that we use for our hello world controller and what it exactly does. Does is like it tells the web browser or server that when we actually visit this particular URL pattern, which is actually this pattern, when we visit this particular pattern which is this one, what it does is like it tells the web browser or server to run that particular method and give the response of that particular method, which is actually the return value, so whatever it is. So it is actually combination of a it is actually combination of request mapping and the method such as which is the get method. So request mapping is that. I hope it is understandable. So let's go into the POM file and then go what exactly POM file does is and how is it solving our life. And from the project we go into this particular pom.xml. So what it does is like it sets few properties. It sets our project to use particular dependencies. Those are actually Java files, jar files. Those we will be using for our project. So when you actually set these dependencies, so what we actually tell our project is that use all the dependencies, all the jar files those are needed for our framework, then use for the tests and all that. So these things, then we are actually excluding it. So these things, the POM file would be explained later, but for now what it does is like it tells our application or Spring framework that these files or these jar files are needed for this particular project, so download them from internet without us downloading them and then putting them into a particular path. So what it does is like it goes into the particular repositories and from them it downloads jar files and then it puts them here in the Maven DB. So these files are what exactly they are doing is like they are actually taking particular files and then downloading them and then putting them here. If you see, if we remove for example this particular dependency and then we try to build our application, so when it is building actually, so what we do is like we go into our overview of the application. You see that it doesn't recognize these beans, these annotations, and it is giving errors. Why? Because dependencies were deleted and now our project does not find that particular jar files. So what we do is like we go back into our POM file, does do it back. So what would happen is like now these errors would be gone. So now it says yeah, I can find that particular jar files and yeah, I see that everything is correct and now I can run the application. So this is what exactly POM file does. Downloads dependencies, jar files. By dependency what I mean is like the files, the jar files are the libraries that our project depends on. So those dependent files would be downloaded and put into this Maven dependencies. Now let's go into, so this was for all for today. For the next project what we'll be doing is like we'll be going into multiple controllers and then we'll be putting a little bit of logic into multiple controllers, and then we'll be going a little bit into mapping, how does mapping work and what exactly how to play with multiple controllers and how to define them. By controllers I mean we can actually define multiple methods with multiple request mappings and then we can use them to display multiple different pages, multiple different results. So how the URLs are working, how URL patterns are behaving, all those things we'll go into them in the next tutorial. Until then, take care and practice and practice.